Thank you very much, and hello everyone to this very special seminar. We're going to be talking about something that is essential to all of our lives. But before we start with the content, let me just share few information with you. First of all, my name is Violeta Bulc, and I am a curator of Eco-Civilization movement. We launched the movement in April in 2020. Basically, I was provoked by many crises that we had to face within the last 10 years, and the lack of capacity to address them adequately in depth in order to avoid them in the next cycle of challenges, especially for the benefit of people and the planet as a whole. So the core goal of the movement is to collectively find a way to keep the planet Earth as a vibrant ecozone of our galaxy. We assume that the next civilizational paradigm will emerge from global consciousness and will actually manifest new ways of engagement based on transparency, trust, and the empowerment of people to do what we feel is the right thing to do. We are intertwining with many individuals and networks around the world through many different events that are taking place, and you can see them all being published in the Eco-Civilization page that was mentioned before already. And what we're after is really to start dreaming collectively about the world that we want to live, and then collectively deliver it with the localization, acknowledging the importance of local authenticity and local inputs for the global benefits. The core of the Eco-Civilization movements are Eco-Civilization wings, and I'm so glad that we have some of the Eco-Civilization wings today here with us. Currently, we're in 26 countries, but today, my special thanks by all means goes to our dear friend and Eco-Civilization wing for Myanmar, Dr. NiNi Thein. Her incredible dedication and commitment to our cause, and especially to the subject that she loves so much, has resulted in the series of 3 events we're going to be hosting this year as part of the Eco-Civilization movement. And the first one we are all witnessing today. Her selection of guests is incredible, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing and experiencing the wisdom and the knowledge and the proposals for the future of water on this planet. I think we can all agree that that is one of the essential elements that we will have to collectively deal with. Otherwise, this will become one of the biggest divides of this world. And I do hope that our awareness and our consciousness are high enough that we can sit together around the table, and with the use of water diplomacy, achieve a good solution for the entire world. I know that for many of us, including myself, water diplomacy was not the common expression that we used to use until today. Until a few days ago, when I really started to dive into it and understand how important it is to actually name it, the water diplomacy, to have a word for it, and to start really addressing it on a systemic level with all the professional attitude and knowledge and experiences that we can. And when I browsed a little bit, definition was actually very simple. Water diplomacy can be defined as the use of a diplomatic instruments to existing or emerging disagreements and conflicts over shared water resources, with the aim to solve or mitigate those for the sake of cooperation, regional stability, and peace. And definition itself already contains all the challenges that we might be facing in the future. So that simple definition is actually prompting us to understand that this might seriously be a very serious issue. And that is sometimes hard to really grasp in the areas, for example, where I live today, where the water is in abundance. But at the same time, when I say so, we are already realizing that climate change is challenging us on this basic element, because all of a sudden we have these huge quantities of waters coming in a very short period of time, and all our systems are really not ready for something like that. So I'm pretty sure that that's not only in Slovenia and in the European Union, but this might be the case all over the world. So water diplomacy is not only intervening in the disputes, but is bringing forward a very important topics for all of us to address and to be able to sustain the quality of life. And I know that in many places around the world, that is no longer the case, because as pictures are showing us, the projected water scarcity is really alarming, and is dividing the world on really two levels. And whichever way you look at them, whatever is blue at this point has a prognosis that will not be probably dealing with the big water issues, but the rest of the world will. So can we show now here a global awareness and global consciousness? Can we address this together and make sure that the planet is a safe, shared place for everyone, and understand how can we address this with all our technology, or with all our commitment, and of course, with all our solidarity that we need to show in cases like that. Even if we take a look at two other pictures, we see that water reserves around the world are not equally spread. And even though you have water reserves, this picture does not correspond with the previous one, which means how are the systems built in order to spread the water, in order to get the water to people who need it, to the fields, to the communities, to the villages, to the cities. And that is a big challenge as well. And the same is with the map that shows the future of water, where we can see again the prognosis for the future is very different, and the world is not equally addressed with the quantities of water. And what the important report from IPCC report is telling us is that we are not ready to deal with the different patterns of getting water, which means that wetter areas of this planet Earth are getting wetter, and drier areas are getting drier. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to deal with this? What can the water diplomacy deliver? How much hope we can have? All about that and even more in our today's session. So my dear friend NiNi, the word is yours, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to hear your guests and to hear our guests, and of course to learn on this incredibly important topic of our future firsthand. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you very much, my dearest friend. For all the audience, if you don't know, let me repeat that Madam Chair, H.E. Dr. Violeta Bulc, is the G100 Eco-Civilization Wing Global Chair, and the former Deputy Prime Minister of Slovenia, as well as the EU Transport Commissioner. So she has a very big passion to build up the eco-civilization. So eco-civilization was actually founded, but she is very modest, so she expressed herself as a curator. Actually, in my eyes, she is the founder of the eco-civilization, where I found her from that theme. So I was fall in love with the subject matter before seeing the lady. But when seeing the lady, she and Rajni, Dr. Rajni from India, interviewed me. At that time, you know, Violeta was very receptive, and she opened and she said, we do co-create. So you do your best and we do our best. But then G100 came in the picture of eco-civilization. And let me explain you a little bit about G100. It is the Global Lady Female Leader 100, taking care of the 100 issues. So we put our mind to 100 global chairs. Our Violeta is our HE, Dr. Violeta is one of that 100. However, that is interesting because she built up her emperor and entered into the 100, not the 100 growing the eco-civilization. So that is also my learning. And when I was assigned to be Myanmar chair, I took the same example. In Myanmar, I go and look for the ladies who are already well established and successful with their own theme, like Dr. Tan Tan Singh for agriculture, Dr. 𝐶𝐸𝐸 for architecture and green building, etc., etc. So that, you see, when we want to co-create the world where we would like to live in, where the water is secured and the climate change risk are minimized, we need the already successful people. And that is how, you know, the top G100 and then the global chair, and one global chair has obligation to form one at least 100 country chairs. 100 each one country chair has to form another 100 the thematic or geographic chairs. So that is how we do. And in Myanmar nowadays, we are having 29. But then you see, we are in the stage of quoting. You know, the Myanmar ladies are very shy. I was telling our chair, but now she has all the data, you know, because they register the webinar, and she can now directly in touch with them and find out, you know, are you happy with us? And what are you interested? Etc., etc. So that is how we form the eco-civilization. And the water issue is, as our chair stated, it is live and it is very important. And all my life long, I'm 60 plus and my service is 44 years. But I do not feel that we have really achieved in this area, water diplomacy and the water and peace frontier, so to speak. In 2002, yes, 2002, UNEP and ourselves and Australian friends tried like public acceptance. You know, it is one of the 7 principles of the World Commission on Dams recommendations. We did in 2002, and now we are trying the same thing with a very tiny baby progress. And then what happened with 2014, we were in the audience of Pope John Paul II, and we did the water resources management and spiritual transformation. That our last speaker, second last, Professor Dr. Aaron Wolf, he has been working on this water diplomacy issue for his lifelong. So this way, we are trying to bring water experts into our eco-civilization group, our community, and trying to listen to them from the expert first. And second is to discuss back, and answer the question of our chair, oh, what do we do? What will we do? And how do we co-create? And how much we hope to succeed, etc. So without further delay, I would like to start the panel, and also one information that our first speaker, Mr. 𝐤𝐴𝐿 could not make it. So that is also why I use 5 minutes to explain about our journey and how we will do today webinar together with the panelists and discussants and all our audience. The registration count was 115. So I expect that slowly, we will fill up the room of the audience. So please relax, sit back, and pay attention to our panelists. Order of appearance. First one to speak is Dr. Ursula Schäfer-Preuß, founding member, Women in Global Health, WGHGER Germany, and member of think tank W7 in G7. Also, she was, also she was the vice president of ADB. The title of her talk is Water is Life, Working Together with Partners. I would like to invite Sister Ursula to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening or good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I do hope you can well understand me. Is it okay? Fine. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of this first G100 Eco-Civilization Water webinar, let me thank you, the organizers, and in particular, my dear friend and sister, Professor Dr. NiNi Thein, for inviting me to contribute as panel member to this important virtual event. The topic of our conference, Water Diplomacy, Water and Peace, and my contribution, Water is Life, Working Together with Partners, is very dear to my heart. Having been actively involved in issues related to women's empowerment and challenges of the young generation, our children and grandchildren, in the context of sustainable development and issues of eco-civilization, as you may name it, during all my professional life and beyond. My passion has always been the floating world, ukiyo-e, the Japanese word, and the masterpieces of Japanese woodblock artists like Utamaro and Hiroshige, for example. I myself do have a small collection of ukiyo-e woodblock prints here in my house in Potsdam in Germany. I grew up at a big river, the River Rhine, in the western part of Germany, with lots of transboundary environmental challenges in the middle of the 20th century. I remember that as young children, we could swim in the river. Eels grew there or other fish for human consumption. In a cold winter, there were ice floes floating on this big river. But with the growing industrial, chemical, and pharmaceutical production along the river from the south up to the north, the pollution and the warming of the river grew. No fish, no ice floes, and no swimming in the river anymore. Only with a political will and the initiative of the governments of the 7 riverine countries, Germany, France, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Liechtenstein, Austria, and Switzerland, and later the European Commission, it was possible to clean up the river. An internationally acknowledged commission had been established. For that purpose, in 1950, the International Commission for the Protection of the River Rhine, which continues to be very active with additional specialized bodies in these days. It took many years to prove that with transboundary cooperation and well-designed policies and investments and water diplomacy by the riverine countries and the industrial countries and investments by the industrial companies, it has been possible and continues to be possible to make changes and contribute to eco-civilization. Turning from my personal experience so many years ago to our world of today. We do have the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, you all know it, unanimously agreed by all members of the UN family in September 2015. We have traveled halfway now until the year 2030. It is a difficult and complex journey to move from recommendations and recipes to concrete actions, implementing the 17 goals of the 2030 Agenda. Looking specifically into the goals number 5, this is gender equality, number 6, all issues related to water, water safety, water security, and goal 17, ensure and sustainable management of water and strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. This is the partnership goal. I can only state here that we have to actively continue building bridges over troubled waters and really working towards the SDG 2030, in particular with these 3 goals. The UN Statistical Commission will present next week, it is really very timely, a reality check. Are we on track to achieve SDG 5, the gender goal, the women's goal, by 2030? It can already be seen in the annual stock-taking report, which is accompanying this exercise, progress on SDGs, the gender snapshot, that it is still a very long road ahead of us in meeting the targets of this goal number 5. The same applies to the implementation of the water goal, with large deficits in accomplishing the relevant 11 indicators, which is laid down in the UN synthesis report on water and sanitation 2 years ago. What can be done to speed up implementing the SDG 2030 agenda? And here in particular, these 3 goals I have mentioned, but not to forget about our physical habitat and the environment we do live in, be it at large rivers, at small rivers, mountains, the countryside, big or small cities or townships. This is the goal number 13. I'm a strong believer in the dynamics of partnership for sustainable development, be it at the local, regional, national, and/or international level. And we really do have some wonderful partnership-based participants here among us, representing the power of women in the world of water, aiming at well-being and happiness. We do have a founder and chair of the Water Mothers organization among us, my dear friend and sister NiNi, and also my friend from the days when I was chair of the Global Water Partnership, the honorary president of Women for Water Partnership, Alice Baumann-Dentner, but I think she will not be virtually here with us, but she is mentally with us today. I just want to refer to Women for Water Partnership, as this organization really has been starting work from grassroots level, looking into the needs of its members on the ground and move up from there with some seed money, for example, to start the water business, which is so important on the ground. I think this is a very reasonable and down-to-earth approach, and I'm sure we will hear more about that in this session or even in our next two webinars we will have. Let me at this juncture refer to one action-oriented program with which it can be demonstrated that step by step it is possible to pave the way in implementing various pathways of the Agenda 2030, aiming at a world that leaves no one behind. During my time at Global Water Partnership, the first ever GWP gender strategy has been published in 2015, based on the famous Dublin Principle number 3, that is, women play a central role and a central part in the provision, management, and safeguarding of water. Based on that strategy, a so-called action piece has been established in 2017, named Gender Equality and Inclusion in Water Resources Management. The substance of this framing paper on gender and the SDG 6 on water, leadership, analysis, participation, resources, has then been supported by a high-level panel on water in New York in 2018, with recommendations being very important: implement integrated approaches to water management at local, national, and transboundary level, strengthen water governance, and ensure gender and social inclusion. These recommendations are since then filled with life on our way to implementing the Agenda 2030. GWP has moved on with its engagement in taking a gender transformative approach to development as an important part, for example, of the water investment program, and with tailored support to women's leadership in a transboundary water management project by the Southern African Development Community. And a very recent activity of GWP sheds light on designing and implement country-led actions to advance the specific SDG indicators related to the degree of implementation of integrated water resource management. I'm sure we will hear more about this program later by one of our fellow panel members here. And but just that I want to state here that I find this a very good way forward, that in context an interesting online course will take place later this year, focusing on advancing towards gender mainstreaming in water resources management. With such concrete steps, it will be possible to contribute to partnership-based implementation of all our overall agenda, water is life. In summing up, I want to state at this juncture that with a lot of personal commitment and passion, listening to local voices and lessons learned, reflecting indigenous knowledge and the political will to make well-balanced changes as described in the 2030 agenda, we can jointly move on to pave the way towards a spiritual transformation for conscious water businesses, the theme of our talk and our discussion today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sound is not there.
Thank you very much, Asula. I would like to go on with the next speaker without trying to make the key points of Asula. It is to save the time. So I will text the time at least as possible. Also, our chair already make some key points on the chat. So please follow the chat. The key points are already there. And the second speaker is Dr. Nisreen. And I would like to introduce Dr. Nisreen first. HRH Dr. Nisreen El-Hashemite is an executive director of the Royal Academy of Science International Trust and founder, president of the Women in Science International League. Princess Dr. Nisreen is the granddaughter of the King Faisal bin El-Sharif Hussein, the first king of Iraq and founder of the modern state of Iraq, where the Iraqi nation, with all of its diversified ethnic origins and religions for the first time, following the steps of her ancestors and vowing to preserve the traditions of her family, Princess not only dedicated herself to serving mankind, but also is an internationally recognized first royal princess medical doctor and scientist and winner of awards and honorary doctorates in the fields of science, arts, literature, and humanitarian affairs. She published several scientific papers as original investigations, more than 30 scientific and social studies, and is the author of 8 books. In 2007, Dr. Nisreen El-Hashemite accepted the Royal Academy of Science International Trust, RACIT, offer to become the executive director and thus left her scientific career, to which she was very committed at Harvard Medical School, to devote time to serving science, technology, and medicine education and research, as well as sustainable development programs worldwide. I need to apologize, my chair and the first speaker, Dr. Asula, for not reading Dr. Asula's long bio. I was really stressed with the time and really panicked that we would be late for the closing. So sorry, Asula, from now on, I will read the full CV for everyone. And we will also send the full CV of our speakers to the audience. Thank you very much. Now the floor is for Dr. Nisreen. May I please?
Thank you very much indeed, Professor. Really appreciate it. Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Peace upon you all. I would like to express my sincere thanks to my soulmate and to my sister, Professor NiNi, for including me in this event, which I highly appreciated very much. We are meeting today to discuss water. If I may, I would like to change the style of my speech today. So usually I speak in international communities with policymakers, etc. And my speeches are much more like very formal. When I left my career at Harvard Medical School to join RACIT, I wanted to be the voice of those unheard. I wanted to be the voice of people. So today, I would like to be similar to water, so transparent. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to tell you my water story or my story with water. As you may know, I am a direct descendant of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. My parents taught me the meanings of being a Hashemite and direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. The first lesson: this is not an honor to live on, but rather a mission from God to serve a humanity, and I repeat, al-alamin, which is a humanity. Second lesson: to greet everyone with peace, because peace has to start within ourselves and to give it to others. Third lesson: the first message of God to the Prophet was read, which means to value education and science. And I would like to let you know that the most repeated word in the Holy Quran is ilm, meaning science and knowledge. When you work on science, always remember it has to be for the benefit of a humanity. Always share with people through education and let people strive with through your science. Fourth lesson: manners, because when a person has manners, then will value his or her own, when a person has manners, will then value his or her fellow humans and God creation, the planet with all creatures living on it, which is in scientific term, the ecosystem. Fifth lesson: do respect water. God said in the Holy Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. From water, we made everything alive. Do not waste water, do not pollute it, do not disturb its journey through nature. Sixth lesson: equality and equity, and the value of women as the source of life like water. Ladies and gentlemen, you might say, what on earth she's talking about here? Please be patient with me and let me continue my story. I grew up with the three brothers. I'm the only girl and the youngest. I have three brothers older than me, who are always have been my teachers and mentors. My eldest brother, Prince Professor Adil, taught me chemistry and mathematics. My first lesson when I was 6 years old was H2O, which is water. The second brother, Prince Professor Adnan, taught me arts and music, and my first painting lesson was with blue colors to paint a river and the sea. And the first piano lesson was a famous song for Fairuz about water and rain. My third brother, Prince Professor Ahmed, taught me physics, and my first lesson was how to generate electricity from water, and also how to understand water so I can swim in a river, sea, or ocean. Then, when I became 15 years old, my father gave me his book, which is about water, to read it and give my opinion. And also, my mother started teaching me the history of water, and with it, how the journey of a humanity started. My life continued in the science and medicine career, and through the career, I always deal with water. And through the years, water continued with me through my coffee paintings, and more through the difficult time, go beside water or listen to water, and even tell my story to water. My life journey has been full of challenges, but the sound of water has always been that sound of peace, vision, imagination, innovation, strength, and much more, of loving and giving unconditionally. Throughout the years, I started learning more about water and appreciating and valuing water more. In the year 2018 in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, during the Women Water Forum, I heard many wonderful speeches from amazing women, which I couldn't remember so many of it, except for some few. You might be surprised, but actually I am a person that follows her heart, and the word has to touch me for me to hear it and understand it. Just after the opening segment, my eyes were looking towards a Dutch lady who moderated the first session. Her voice, her smile, her words were much more like water for me. And this is my dearest friend and sister, Dr. Alice Boomen-Dentener. The second session then started, and was that lady from Myanmar speaking my language. My language, I am the science princess, as the international community keep calling me, that language of science, youth, implementation. And this is my dearest sister, Professor NiNi. In the same event, I was sharing the World Bank panel. And honestly speaking, I thought maybe my titles are so attractive, particularly I am not specialist in economics and finance, and that's why they selected me to share this panel, the HRH Princess Doctor. During the panel, I heard many amazing speeches, but then the specialists were talking about building new infrastructures for least developed and developing countries. And I asked the specialist a question: what about the old infrastructure in old cities like London, Paris, Amsterdam, New York, etc.? How we can solve the issue of infrastructure? It is only with the new ones. In your opinion, even the new infrastructure will become old. Are we gonna leave everything old and destroyed and bring in new ones? How we can solve the issue of old infrastructure? In London, we used to drink the water from the tap. Now we cannot, we buy water. So imagine, what can we do? All what we need, I said to them, is to invest in science-based solutions and programs if we want to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 6 and its nexus and its importance to our life. As an executive director of the Royal Academy of Science International Trust, we gave a pledge to contribute to the United Nations Water for Sustainable Development Action Decade through science, technology, innovation, equity, and inclusion without leaving anyone behind. After the event in Dushanbe, I spoke with my father, the late Prince Mohammed bin King Faisal I of Iraq, who said to me that science like water represents equality. My father's quote may seem simple on the surface, but it is layered in meanings. He also reminded me with a quote from his book about water, which was published in 1986. And I quote, "To find sustainable solutions for the water problems worldwide, we must consider understanding the cultural dimension and social aspects of water and recognize its fundamental role in society's life, prosperity, and development." And since then, my journey with Dr. Alice Bowman-Dentiner started through RASET, a global program for water. Alice and I worked hard to bring the framework for action for RASET's program on water, but what was missing is a name for this program. My mother is
you have 5 minutes.
Yes.
You have 5 minutes. Yeah,
yes,
5 minutes.
I'm getting there. My mother, Sharifa Fatima Al-Hashemite, wrote to us a letter, and I will select some few lines from it. With water, the journey of a humanity started. Water, every human's right, is the biggest challenge facing a humanity. If you look closely to water, if you know the role of water in social and economic development, if you learn to appreciate the beauty of water and how to live and with harmony and respect for fellow humans and nature, if you understand that water is the source of life like women, then you will value water, equality, and its results, peace and prosperity for all. I chose the name Jansu for this global program, which is founded by 2 women in science. In Arabic and Anatolian cultures, women were always representing the source of life like water. The name Jansu is originated from Anatolia, meaning life is water. Jansu Global is a program that promotes the development, incubation, sharing, and application of science, technology, and innovation in the water domain. It is built on the understanding that transdisciplinary science and research that looks at the development issues holistically and through a water lens is a main driver for sustainable and equitable development without leaving anyone behind. We can give you more information about Jiangsu. But one of the top achievements of Jiangsu Global, that last February we celebrated on the 11th of February, the 7th International Day of Women and Girls in Science. And the event's theme was Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Water unites us. The event discussed bridging the science voices to action, science for society and water diplomacy, reshaping water economics, and investment in science-based solutions for inclusive green growth. The opening segment was opened by heads of states, including the president of Slovenia, and Slovenia was a co-organizer of the event. The event also featured Jiangsu Global Media Room and connecting the two disciplines, science with arts, to appreciate and to value our environment and its life resources, the water, through the unique 𝐸𝐵RO water art performance. And 𝐸𝐵RO is the art of painting on water, telling vibrant stories on paper. Thus, the journey of a humanity is told when colors are floated on the surface of the water. And the outcome document of the event endorsed by 46 member states, and it is still open. Ladies and gentlemen, now, why do we need to talk about water or water diplomacy or peace? Is it because water, the source of life only? What is the point of having water if it is polluted with weapons and its chemicals, like the depleted uranium and its impact on my home country, Iraq, and its rivers, and what it caused from diseases like cancers, etc., etc. What is the point of having water if it is polluted with pharmaceuticals and industries waste? What is the point of having water if it is overconsumed for the desire of people? So I told you my story with water. This story gives me the personal connection to that element, the H2O, whether it's surface or ground, or even that comes from the sky as rain or snow. If everyone will look within him or herself and see where they have a personal connection with water, then we will know how to value and respect water. We will know how to appreciate peace, the people and the planet. And we will know then how we will deploy science and innovation to tell us how to revive peace, to tell us how to improve our lives. We will then learn and teach how to be grateful for the source of life and not destroy it with the human greed and power, desires, and weapons. We will leave something for our children and grandchildren to live with and from. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, with water, the journey of a humanity started. This is what my mother wrote. And for me, I would say, with water, the journey of peace is starting from today. Let's hope for peace for everyone. Peace for everyone. To save our people's lives, a human being comes first. Let's talk about peace within ourselves. Let's talk about respect, values. Let's talk about education and science. And let's be a human being. Ladies and gentlemen, I will leave you with one quote from my grandfather, King Faisal I of Iraq. He said, the future of a nation is it depends on or is in the hands of its teachers, scholars, and scientists. So this is the future of every nation is in our hands. The doctors, the scientists, the artists, the scholars, the philosophers, everyone. I started with Assalamu alaikum, peace upon you, and I leave you with Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Maalaikum salam. Thank you very much, Princess. We are very happy with your very rich and passionate statement. The last one, may I repeat, today, the journey of water for peace begin. Thank you. But because of the time's sake, let me rush to Professor Dr. Aaron Wolf. Professor Dr. Aaron Wolf is a professor of geography in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences at Oregon State University, with an appointment as a professor of water diplomacy at IHE Delft. It is my alma mater. He has a Master of Science in Water Resources Management and PhD in Environmental Policy Analysis from the University of Wisconsin. His research focuses on issues relating transboundary water resources to political conflict and cooperation, where his training combining environmental science with dispute resolution theory and practice have been particularly appropriate. Actually, his work is a full page long, but I would like to shorten it, that he was awarded the 2016 American Association of Geographers Gilbert R. White Distinguished Published Service Honor. Is recognition of his work on seeking peaceful approaches to international competition over water resources. And in 2015, Haynes Award for Public Policy for applying 21st century insights and ingenuity, as well as ancient wisdoms to complex problems for the security of the planet. He was also named first place for the 2013 Second Monitor del Giardino Environmental Award by the Fondazione Paci Monumentali Bernardini Perron in Florence. As you know, my French is not really correct. Sorry, Italy. In my different language is not correct, but never mind. He was named a Ranking Class Hero by Miller McCune magazine in 2009, received the OSU Milton Harris Award in Basic Research in 2008, also was named Outstanding Freshman Teacher at the University of Alabama in 1997, and with Ariel Diner was awarded Best Paper for 1997 in Agriculture and Resource Economic Review. Professor Wolf is a member of the Oregon Academy of Sciences, the Association of American Geographers, the American Water Resources Association, and the International Water Resources Association, and an associate member of the International Association for Water Law. He is an associate editor of World Water Policy and is on the editorial board of Water International. He was an associate editor from 1995 to 1999. I will also send by email his full CV. So actually, Aaron has his lifelong experience and being recognized for this water diplomacy. But honestly, I think that he needs women help. So let's see Professor Aaron Wolf explaining about water diplomacy, water and peace. Professor Aaron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, NiNi, and what an honor to be here. And I'm so grateful to you, one, for all the work that you are doing, and two, for including me in this esteemed group. And of course, I want to start by recognizing, yes, we all need women's help as much as possible. And thank you for that generous introduction. I want to just offer a couple of observations from my experience in water diplomacy, and in that very generous introduction, you focused on the scientific background that I have and the Western background that I have. But as you know, because we now know each other for I think some 20 years, is when we met in IHE, which is very generously represented here. Is there's another side that's deeper and higher and arguably more valuable to us. And so I want to put those two in perspective. So I started, as you mentioned, as a scientist, as a hydrogeologist, working for the US agency that manages water resources, and quickly found my goal, of course, was to help facilitate dialogue around water. And I found that the technical side was useful, the scientific side was useful, but when there was a room full of angry people, and I would come into the room and I would say, you don't have to be angry anymore, I found the answer, that only made them angrier. And so I really started to understand that I needed to know more about people, about process, about the sources of anger and insecurity, the things that that bring us to not only to discord, but also to dialogue. And so I went back to learn more about conflict and conflict resolution. So my world, as you mentioned, is generally the world of transboundary waters. We have 311 basins around the world, and it's about half the land surface of the earth, and another 700 aquifers that cross borders. And in that experience, what's interesting is who's interested in this world of shared waters. If you look at the kind of global level, what you'll find is that the security people, the intelligence people, the people who focus on war and peace are generally focused on the conflict dimension, the conflict aspect. And there are reports from militaries and from intelligence communities around the world about the coming conflicts over water and water as a source of conflict. And almost in parallel, there's the whole world of water resources that conversely is much more focused on the cooperation potential, the capacity of water to induce dialogue, to bring us together. And so I think that conversation has shifted gently over the last decades from only thinking about the potential for water wars to now, how do we use water as a vehicle for dialogue and for peace building? And nonetheless, within what we call the West, the approach to dialogue has been very rational, has been very presented in an objective way. And so a lot of us tap into the world of the Harvard School of getting to yes, where we separate the people from the problem, we invent options, and in a way that's objective and quantitative. And like the science, this is a profoundly useful approach, and I think misses a lot of the point. When I'm in a room and there's a sudden transformative moment where people are quickly shifting their view from focusing on their positions and their rights to starting to understand the shared values and starting to see the potential for the benefits of dialogue, that's not a rational process. That's a transformative process that I would argue we need to go deeper to understand. And so that led me on a several I think, more than 10 years now, having the chance to sit with spiritual traditions, with faith traditions around the world, to try to understand from within those contexts, how do we understand conflict, how do we understand transformation, and learning that so much of the process is much more around how do we sit, how do we honor each other, how do we learn to listen, not with our ears, but from the heart? How do we learn to aspire to a higher level of dialogue than purely the technical or the rational or the scientific allows? And fortunately, our indigenous communities and our faith traditions offer millennia of experience. The sulha from the Palestinian world, for example, that brings communities in dialogue, and where you learn to balance resolving a conflict without humiliation. This idea of balancing self and other, the individual rights with the community dialogue. And many traditions, for example, in Singapore, are renewing these ancient traditions in what they call the Kampung spirit, where they're similarly renewing their commitment to group processes and dialogue. Some of the wealth of experience comes out, I think, in a framework for dialogue where people start with their positions, with what they want, with what they feel they deserve. And behind that are the interests, the why they are where they are. But deeper than that are their shared values and the potential for harmony. And these have a parallel, I think, in our worlds, in our four prisms that we all see the world, the physical world, the emotional world, the mental world, and the spiritual world. And this is a framework that I've come to appreciate from many traditions. You might recognize it from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's much, much deeper than that. In my own tradition, these are the four levels that Moses went up as he went up Mount Sinai, that it's embedded in the Jewish prayer service as a guided meditation through these four worlds. We see it in Vishnu's, the four totems that he holds, the mace, his physical strength, the lotus flower representing the glory of existence, the discus representing the mind chakra, and then the conch creating this primeval sound of all creation. We see this in Buddhism, of course, the four sights that the Buddha observed as he started on his path to enlightenment. There's a tradition in Buddhism, Anapanasati, which is, again, a guided meditation through these four realms, four jhanas or states of consciousness. We see these in the churches of Europe. We see these in the four elements that are presented, and archangels that each are responsible for these elements. We see these in indigenous traditions, the idea of a medicine wheel, and in my part of the world, in the shamanic traditions, and in Sufism. And in Sufism, we learned a key lesson, I think, that's useful for dialogue, is that the deeper we get in exploring our shared values, the more our distinctions dissipate. So the way it was explained to me is that the basic level at Sharia, we're taught what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. The deeper level at Tariqa, we're taught what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours. And if we go further into the level of hakika, of truth, we realize there is no mine and there is no yours. And finally, at Marifah, the level of attunement, we understand that there is no me and there is no you. And this is the path, I think, of dialogue, where we learn that our own distinctions start to dissipate. I think, what does this have to do with water? Similarly, there are four types of water. We talk about physical water that we move, that we see, that we touch. We talk about mental water, the water that we calculate, the water where we affix a price and think about efficiencies, but also the emotional water, water tied to sovereignty and to power and to history. And finally, spiritual water, water that is connected to spiritual transformation in all of our traditions. And I think as in water diplomacy, certainly in the West, we're so good at focusing on the physical and the mental, but the actual roots of the conflict may be in the emotional and the spiritual. And so I think the lesson, the key lesson, is to recognize the unified approach that we need to take, understanding all four of our prisms, all four of our understandings, whether it's about our relationship to each other, or certainly our relationship to water, to unify those four in a holistic understanding around what it is that we look for in each other and with our relationship to water. I just want to end, there's a report, the New Zealand National Water Policy Statement, heavily influenced by Maori indigenous understanding. And I think they, in one paragraph, sum up these four understandings well, that all things in the natural world have a Maori, a life force, and a spiritual dimension. Respect for the spiritual integrity of the environment and God that created it will ensure that the treasure can be protected and passed on to succeeding generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Aaron. Actually, you have 2 more minutes. When I put my hand up, it is 5 minutes before. So anyway, you can talk, or you can also make up at the discussion time.
I think we'll turn it over to the group.
Yeah, thank you. So I will go on to Professor Eddie Morse, our last speaker, and we will then have a very lively discussion. So Professor Eddie Morse is rector of IHE Delft, Institute for Water Education in the Netherlands. He also holds the position of Professor Water and Climate at Free University Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Professor Morse started his career at the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, working in Africa and Caribbean. Before coming to Delft, he worked as Wageningen University and research. He serves as president of the Global Network of Water Museums, which I like it very much, is a member of the board of trustees of the Just Digit Foundation and member of the SENSE Research School. He is associate editor of the journal Environmental Science and Policy, as well as member of the editorial board of Climate Services. Professor Morse specialized in the research of climate change mitigation and adaptation. He did his doctorate on water use of forest in the Netherlands. So he has given me quite, neat one. I would like to add that Professor Morse is very approachable and generous, and also kind to the students, like in Asian. You know, in the Western value, the teachers are friends. And that's it. I have been in Netherlands for 25 years. And so I think I can validate what I state. But in Myanmar, it's different. The teachers are the second pair of parents. And teacher also from their side, then here, the spiritual, touching. So Professor Morse really is, in our eyes, a very professor from the West who has the Asian values. Thank you very much. Professor Morse, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, NiNi. And like the other speakers also mentioned, I'm really very happy that I'm able to say a few words in this meeting. I'm quite honored that I was also asked to do this. And I must say that I also see my position as something that I got. And I really see people like yourself, NiNi, but also Aaron is working together with us at IG. But also a lot of other people as the real institute. So I'm only have the honor to represent you. I also have a slide or a couple of slides I would like to share with you. So I will start sharing my screen and see if this works out. And hopefully you see my screen. Is that okay? Yes? Okay, thank you very much. So what I want to do is maybe not say too much about water diplomacy, but what I would like to focus on a little bit is also on what can we do together on water, because I fully agree with what the former speakers were also saying. For me, water is key, key to life, but also key to a lot of other issues. So what I sought to do is to say a few words about capacity development accelerator, and especially related to water, because IG Delft is an institute that is a little bit biased in the sense that we deal with water, but we try to do this from an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary holistic view. So we think that that is an important part in here. What I put down here is something I think sometimes represents a somewhat broader vision than what you sometimes get from the water experts, because one of the issues I sometimes think is that as water experts, maybe we sometimes talk too much to one another and not enough to actually the other sectors where I think we should talk more to. This is a survey that is done every year by the World Economic Forum, and it tells a little bit about the different risks that are there. And I would like to point out two things here. One is that if you look at the green items marked in this sheet, you see that they're all environmentally related. And also water is in there. So the natural resources crisis, that is the water and food crises put together. And you see that 5 out of those 10 top risks that are perceived by people coming from all different parts of society are perceived as say, coming from the environmental side and being the 10 top risks that are there. Of course, there are movements in there with COVID that has happened. You have disease that comes up. I'm quite sure that after the last couple of weeks that geoeconomic confrontations are probably moving up in the next evaluation. But over the last 5 to 10 years, you have seen that half of those risks are still natural related and environmental related risks. And water is one of them. Then, of course, we heard the speaker saying that as well. I would like to state that with a quote that came along from the Secretary General, that was in 2020, and was because also of a statement that I think we are lacking behind, and I fully agree with the assessment that was done then on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It was also stated that if we would like to achieve those Sustainable Development Goals, we should start with water. If we don't manage to get water in order, it will become really, really difficult to also address all the other statements. This does not mean that you first have to do water, but it means that you have to put a lot of effort in water to also be able to address the other very important 16 objectives that are also there. Then what was also mentioned during this statement is that help out to make this step and to reach and speed up the developments in there. I think that it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to separate them. So I think you have to see them in their connections. So one is financing. The other one is about data information. Next couple of weeks, we will talk about groundwater, invisible water, which is the topic of World Water Day. A quite difficult topic to discuss about because it's, one, difficult to see, but also because we don't have a lot of data, it's also difficult to know what the status is. In earlier discussions, water quality was mentioned as being important. I fully agree. Water quality for groundwater is even a bigger and a more difficult issue to discuss and address. And I do think that talking about water diplomacy and talking about treaties, I think there is more and more emphasis also about good quality water in those treaties. And a lot of those treaties start us with transportation, but I do see that more, and I think more interest is also needed to come up with good treaties to understand how we together would like to address the quality of water, both surface water as well as groundwater. Other important part in there is innovations. And innovations is not only about technical innovations as I'm concerned, it's also about social and economic innovations. And the last one is governance. And I skipped one because I thought that that one is evident. And that is, if you want to do that, you need capacity. And you need to develop that, both in people, but also in institutions. So it's also about developing capacity in the governance system that's in place, but also institutions in the country together with the capacity in the people. And I think that's also a little bit what and why I'm so happy to be member and participating in this webinar. It's about creating capacity, building understanding together, and how in the development framework that's set up by UN Water, there are two different parts in there. One part starts with actually countries identifying their water and sanitation capacity gaps, and that comes from the status that now we have good international agreements where we would like to go. But actually, if you really want to make a difference, you should look at the national level or maybe even below the national level. So it's quite important to determine together, okay, we have those international agreements. Well, what can we do and what should we do now at the national level? And then based on that, you have to implement and you have to start making changes in there. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important also to have those other pillars in there. So one of them, for example, is data. You need data about that. But you also need financing. You need to know how you can finance those developments. And I think you also need to look at your governance system. Are the right policies in place to be able to do that? Example could be, for example, reuse of water. More and more possibilities are there, but not in every country there's already a policy that you're allowed to reuse water in different sectors. And how can you then do that in a safe way? So I think all those should come up and I think should be developed together. Coming from IHE Delft, I could not resist to also point back a little bit to a conference that we organized in 2020. That was developing water capacity, and I thought it would be interesting to share that again with you. If you would like and are interested in the full agenda, so please look at the website that is given on the bottom of the sheet. But I just wanted to take out a couple of examples in there. One is that if you're talking about capacity development, often people think about how many children, how many people should we educate. We don't think that's the right approach. And we think you should have this broad approach where you not only talk about individuals, people, but you also talk about what you want to achieve, what you want to do. You come up with an integrated, holistic plan, how to address capacity development there. There are some other issues in there that we think you could pick up, like, for example, talking with funders or development banks. Often they're quite interested to have the right capacity, but not that much interest yet to develop that capacity upfront before they start the projects. And we think it's important to have that discussion with them to see how you can also come with an integrated plan to develop capacity in the broad sense in a country or in a region. I skip some of the others because I think you can read them later on, and I fully would like to invite you to also look at the website. Then moving a little bit to IG, what can we do ourselves? Because it's quite a challenge that trying to say, okay, what can you do yourself now in there? So what we're trying to do at IGC Delft is we are going to launch, and it will start in October this year, a new MSc, or actually 2 new MSCs. Those MSCs are different from what we did in the past. This is much more focused towards what the student would like to do, but also because we focus quite much on mid-career professionals and offering them an MSc and PhD. We also want to be in touch with the funding people, with employers, because very often students come to us and they come there with a goal, with an objective. They want to achieve something. They want to make a difference in their company, in the institution, or in the government. And together with both the student as well as their employer or their funder, we would like to find out, okay, what would you like to be able to do when you leave IHE Delft, so we can prepare you well in what you can do there. Then we do that also by incorporating some new things. We think that finance is playing a bigger role. So we think that engineers should know a little bit about finance. So at least they can present a feasible plan to maybe the Ministry of Planning and Financing, so that they're able to release investments. We think that nature-based solutions are very important. I just mentioned here coastal engineering, but it's everywhere. I do think that there are still some continents in the assets that I think if we don't inform people better about those assets, they will get lost, and it will be a huge investment if you want to repair them. I think there's a quite nice paper from Charlie Forrest-Marty as the lead author on this issue. Have a look at that, because they also give a broad economic assessment about what that then is. So please have a look at that. Also be looking at spiritual ecology, because we fully agree what was said also by earlier speakers, that you should look at water in a broad sense, not only from the physical side, but also look at all the other sides that water has, and because that determines the value of water, and that will help to appreciate water much better than we're doing at the moment. I don't think that our path ends when we have educated our students. We really would like to walk the long path, the path of life, where we hope that with our alumni, but also other people that are interested, we can pave this path together and learn both from those people, those alumni, but also others, but also learn them together with us how we can make next steps in there. And that's what we call lifelong learning. And then as the large part, and I think that's also important, by the way, it will also be the next World Water Day item. So that's partnerships. And that's also the Sustainable Development Goal number 17. We think that's a very, very important part. And we're working on how we can create better partnerships. And we think there are some nice examples in there. I think it will get much more attention. It's also in the just released report from IPCC, the February Working Group 2 report on adaptation, where they also talk about climate resilience development. And I think also quite interesting to have a read in there where we're standing and what possible ways are forward on the water side. Then how can you get involved? Because I think that's also important. We are not going to be able to do this ourselves. I think it's something we need to do together. Here are some suggestions, maybe how we can do that together. One is that we think that it's important that you do a capacity gap assessment. It's also a little bit in line with this accelerator framework that I was talking about earlier, is that you know where the gap is, both individually. It can be with yourself. It can also be with others, but it can also be with organizations. That I think this knowledge where the gap is can already help you to overcome some of the problems. but also in some cases see if you can fill this gap and become a better individual or a better organization. We think it's important to select training programs and both for individuals and institutional capacity. We think that we may help with our alumni network that we very much value and that we actively engage. So we hope that with this experience that is coming from all parts of the world, and I think it brings together quite some different cultures and knowledge. I think it can be broader. I think there's still a lot of other knowledge within the world. So I would very much welcome to connect those networks as well and to see what we can do to set up an education and training program to increase this capacity that we need to further the water sector. We're quite interested and we strongly believe in long-term partnerships. So we think it's important not only to start working together for a short period of time that you quite often do in a project, but we think we should think about further than projects. We think you should think about how you would like to develop a vision together, how you would like to develop this partnership for the long run. And I think a very practical side is that you can help us to make those connections by making introductions or recommendations, looking for possibilities for students to come and study at IG or at other places. There are a lot of collaborations. Aaron is one of the examples there. We do have a collaboration also with Oregon State University, but we also do that with other universities. And I think it's quite nice to see that so many people are actually interested in water, and that I think there are opportunities to do this. But I think we should reach out and bring this together, align it also, and see how we can make a next step in there. So what I would like to stop with is with this quote from Einstein, and he has some other very nice quotes, but I like this one myself a bit. And that is that I think you should also think out of the box because what he's also stating, if we continue using the science and what we know already to solve the problems of the future, then we will never be there. I think that's also a challenge, and not only to us as an academic institute, but to all academics, but also to all teachers, it's that you actually are thinking and teaching people about the problems that are still to come. And I think that's a really, really big challenge that we should not forget, that we're looking at problems that we don't even recognize yet, and that we're preparing people to be able to address those problems. So with that, I would like to stop, and I would like to thank again the organization for allowing me to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Morse. It was very rich and also end with a lot of opportunities like fellowship opportunities and programmatic approach, etc. We have finished our panel session and we are going to continue for Q&A session. So the way we are going to organize or do the Q&A session is by first the discussant, Mrs. Ferrier. She is from Scotland and she is one of our eco-civilization country chair, I suppose. And she will start ice-breaking question. And I also see one question written in the Q&A, but the question is more directed to Greenway rather than this webinar. So we will answer it when the time comes, or we answer by email, okay? Now I would like to encourage the lively discussion on today's theme and the content of what our distinguished panelist already has said passionately. So I get some key points and everybody get their own key points because we listen with through our experience, you see, through our experience and through our passion. So they will never be the same. Very sure, never be the same. So I would very much like to invite Ms. Ferrier Puren to break the ice. So Feria, you are the best person to break the ice and and lead the lively conversation.
Okay.
And the audience is invited. The audience has to grab Mrs. Feria Puran and say, hey, this is my turn. Okay, let me say, let me question, let me talk. Okay, let's grab the microphone. You can put up the hand or you can just put up like just me. Yeah, I shut up, sorry.
So I'll just ask one
yourself. Yeah.
Or NiNi, just to give me indication if there's somebody putting their hand up so they can interrupt me, right? But I have my neurons firing left, right, and center because I have so many questions for these wonderful people that have just been sharing with us. And I just really want to start out by saying thank you. On behalf of every one of us, thank you. At some points I was teary-eyed, because it's thank you for the work that you do on behalf of the rest of us. And I just want to acknowledge that in that moment, in this moment. And I know there are many others that are doing that as well. And I just really want to say thank you. And because I know the sacrifices it takes to do what we do. So with that, I want to ask a question to Dr. Aaron Wolf. And that is the big question. This is such an incredible resource. And we know water is so sacred, and from all the stories that you were telling and all the stories that I guess you hear in these communities and speaking to people, right? So my question to you is, are we indeed running out of this incredible resource? I mean, we hear all stuff flying all about, and you've got all these stuff going on YouTube, and I just want to know, is this indeed happening? And what is actually the facts around that? And in actual fact, I'm posing it to you, but if Eddie Moores or any one of the rest of you have some more information about that, won't you tell us?
Yeah, no, I'll defer to Eddie, he's rector of an institute that's devoted exactly to answering that question. I'll only talk about in terms of perception. There's not currently the same amount of water that there has been throughout history. The amount doesn't change. What changes is our demand as our populations and our economies grow. And as Dr. Nisreen mentioned, we lose a lot through pollution and through making it unusable in other ways. And so what I think is happening is both. Because of climate change and development and everything else, the hazards are growing and the dangers are growing and the threats are growing. And there's this new report out on climate change. And the opportunities are growing, the promises are growing, our understanding is growing. And so we're able to do so much more in terms of monitoring, from high-level satellites to on-the-ground citizen science. Our ways of dialogue, we're able to communicate around the globe. Look at this meeting as an example that couldn't have happened just 20 years ago. And so I think it depends on where we want to emphasize. The dangers are there, I think, to wake us up and to remind us of the urgency of pulling together in exactly this kind of a venue, and the promises there if we take it, to remind ourselves of our shared humanity, that there is no away any longer. We need to protect what we have and recognize that it really is all that we have. But I'll defer again. Like I said, Eddie has literally hundreds of people working exactly on this problem.
So what do you say, Eddie? What is the news for us?
I think that is a difficult one. I think also what Aaron said is completely correct. I must say that our institute started in 1957, and then you sometimes think, okay, we're now 70 years later. What have we achieved? So why have we not been able to solve all the problems? And I think that's exactly because what Aaron is saying. I think we have been able to solve some of the problems, but we have created new one and bigger ones. And I think that's what and where our challenge is. And I think I'm sometimes seen as a rather positive-looking person, but I think it's the only way to survive.
Yeah.
So I think you should be positive, and I still think that in every person there's a good side. And I think the challenge for us is to look at that. I fully agree with what Aaron said. That's why I also very much appreciate what he's doing. If you look at conflicts and if you look at discussions, then I think it's also important to acknowledge that people are coming from a different history sometimes and a different background, what makes it difficult to solve problems. I do think that we do have all technical knowledge that we need, sometimes not at the right skill, but I do think that we have all technical knowledge that we need to solve the problems. There are still some challenges in there how you can implement that, but where I think the biggest bottleneck is that's more on the social side. That's on how to come up to agreements. They don't have to be as big as some of them we're seeing at the moment. They can be as big as a disagreement between two neighbors. That's sometimes already quite difficult to solve. And I think respect for life is very important. And I think that's where I really like this I think looking back to what indigenous people bring, and I think what religion can bring, and I think there we have to learn that maybe without becoming a member of a certain religion, you can still use the strong elements from this to value water in a different way than what we have been doing.
Yeah. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for that really wise response. In the sense that I see what we battle with and what we have to really be, what out of all of your conversations was the word complexity comes to mind for me, right? So we're really navigating and negotiating complexity. And we as a humankind, we need these tools that'll help us do that. And I think that's what we're struggling with more so than the science and the other stuff, because that comes a lot easier for us, whereas these soft skills seem to have been a little bit harder for us to develop. So one of my next questions would be, Aaron said before, listening with a heart. So I want to ask, before I get to Ursula, just this one question, and how do we do that? How do we do that better? In the sense of how do we listen to the voices, especially the lawmakers, right? The ones who are actually putting the pen down to paper, or these days in different other ways, but they're essentially telling us how to function and how to organize our lives according to these laws that they create. But then we have all these indigenous people that have gathered knowledge over centuries and millennia, and and how do we bridge that gap? How do we make our lawmakers listen with their hearts?
If I may answer a very short, simple answer, it's like people like yourself. You make the difference. I think that's where it starts with, and I'm also quite happy with the younger people that stand up. But I think that's where it starts, and I think the more people like that, the better it becomes. But we really need people like yourself.
Yes.
Okay, so in other words, we need all of us.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, all of us. Yeah. Dr. Nisreen, you want to say something?
Yes, indeed. Well, how to make policymakers listen. So, before, scientists used to communicate with policymakers. Then over a sudden, there was this gap between scientists and policymakers. And when I say scientists, in all fields of science, it's not STEM. You cannot separate science between social or applied sciences. Science is science. Even arts is science. But then what happened? Why we professionals are not in conversation or taking the initiative to go and speak with policymakers to identify the problem or the challenge with the solutions, etc., etc. Because in science, we always think our work is sustainable. So you always keep working on developing solutions, and your solution is based on that particular problem. The problem in that we separated ourselves, we build those bridges, those walls, high walls between us. For me, I start asking a question: who decides what? You know, like, for example, I'll give you a simple example, although it has nothing to do with water, but it fits how people are policy makers, whether at international community or national level. They think, when you talk women's health, what they think, reproductive and sexual health immediately, but they neglect the 6 differences, which is the biological differences in health and illness, and the gender differences, which is the social and economic differences in health and illness. So when you talk to anyone about 6 differences, they will tell you, oh, there is no 6 differences, which is the biological differences. That's why we neglect all these reports, for example, from WHO and etc., etc. So this is an example. But if we, the scientists, leave our castles, the universities, the institutions, and go and speak and make our voices heard, then we can change so many things in policies. Not every country has its science committee within its government. Then another thing, if we scientists go and listen to locals and say that, okay, our work is directed towards locals and we learn from locals, from their knowledge and what are the challenges, and then build the solutions for them and for others. So this is the problem that I cannot say it is the whole problem, but actually that we stepped aside as professionals in our fields to an extent that people nowadays, if you speak to policymakers and from different levels, they do not distinguish between science and technology. They tell you technology gave the vaccine for COVID. They don't understand that it is science, you know. And when you speak about science-based solution, they look at you. Another thing, I will give you an example, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be this will be very short. When I was talking about water in one of the big conferences for investors, and as I said, I don't know why they invite me for investing or investment events. Maybe they are attracted with the HRH princess, doctor, professor, name it, you know. Or maybe because I speak a different language. I speak the language of the people. I work for people. So I was talking about water, and one of the CEOs and the founder of a main company in the world, you know, without mentioning names, he said to me, what on earth I have to do with your speech about water? I looked at him, I said to him, sir, all your business is based on water.
Yeah.
Without the water, you won't have those coffee beans, and you will not be selling coffee. You know? So this is the mentality that we need to change. But if we scientists go out and speak, and we need to have the courage to speak out, and to collaborate. Not only to speak, but to collaborate.
I think this is important. Collaboration and truly wanting that from your heart, right? And you can only do that when you understand your connectivity to everything and when everyone understands their connectivity to everything. So I think this is really important for us to really hear that. How will we collaborate? You know, so I want to just pass on to Dr. Ursula as well, because she had a hand up. Would you like to contribute something, Dr. Ursula?
Well, I wanted to contribute to the earlier issue, and this is the huge complexity of water institutions all over the world. There is not a single body, be it as an interagency institution or a UN-based institution, like we have it in the health sector, agriculture, and food, and so on. And this is something we have been discussing for ages. There are thousands of voices in the water area. It's floating everywhere, universities, institutes, you name it. Well, I know how many there are in Europe, all over the world. And the challenge really being to then come with one voice. We had 𝐷𝐼𝐸, the advisory group on sanitation in particular, but with the Millennium Development Decade coming to an end, it was closed down. Still a lot there of experience. So, but I think all the good thinking and the many recipes we do have also to come up with water diplomacy, we should have one body who really would be able then to channel all the wealth and the importance, also to master the challenges we do have. But that issue, I'm afraid the complexity is too big in order to get it done.
It is, Dr. Ursula, but I think I like Eddie Moore's approach in the sense of being, an optimist of, I know it's challenging, but we got to start somewhere. And so my point is, I think in this very room, we get to start that, right? This is exciting for me because I think, so Eddie, I would like to challenge you and others in here, in these institutions, to be able to say, let's not just talk science. Let's talk about the stuff that separates us, our deeper humanity stuff, right? Because the science we're good with at the moment. I'm not saying we don't focus this, like you mentioned earlier, but maybe turn our focus towards inward, towards why are we not collaborating? Why are we not talking to each other? Why is our language within our institutions so highfalutin that the ordinary human cannot connect with it? So we cannot respond to it. It's not the concept we can't respond to. It's the fact that you use all these language that separates us from your agenda and that which you've learned.
Indeed.
Yes, Nina.
Okay, now you see, Feria, you did excellent job. And now I have to step in because of the hands up, starting from the chair, our panelists, and the Q&A, 4 questions, okay? So I would like to give a chance to our chair first, and then later I will read out all the 4 questions because I would like these questions to be answered by the panelists as well. Thank you, Feria.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, moderator. But let me give the right of way to 2 civilization wings. One is Rajni Vohra from India, and the other one is Natasha Heror from Serbia. I think they will expand our views quite a bit with their comments and questions. Please.
Okay, yeah. And I see Natasha also putting hands up.
Yes,
So
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay. So everyone who has spoken, please please lower the hand so that I can count every time who is the next. Okay.
Okay.
So please, no, not you. The chair offer 2, and only after 2, Natasha will get. Or you are one of 2. Violeta? Natasha is first.
Thank you. I thought Natasha will go, but let's
okay.
let me just impose one very short question, which is kind of challenging me a little bit. We saw years ago water started to become a commodity item. And that is really worrying because we can only speculate that something like that could happen with air and with public space and many other elements that are essential for existence of human beings on this planet Earth. So I wonder, can you see or foresee any global actions that could lead towards sort of not allowing acts like that? Like in country I know best, in Slovenia, we have the right for clean water in our constitution. So can you share with us, how would you go about? Because that is something that citizens will support tremendously. And how we can actually achieve that for every single human being on this planet Earth, and maybe use the same also for air and public space. Thank you. whoever wants to come forward. I'm addressing this to all 4 speakers.
Maybe, Madam Chair, you have a big influence, and it is also for me to break the ice. I think water is the gift of God. You see, water is free. And who owns water? We own water. You see, every drop that falls from the sky to Violeta's house, okay, it's yours. But in India, it is not. It is state. So that you are not allowed to collect the water coming on your roof, and not in America. Okay, so then there are, you know, ideological struggle, and there is another thing called service. So water is free. They said we took money for service. You see, so it is a debate going on along, and you know who wins? Money speaks louder. And I think that is why eco-civilization has a lot of work to do. And we may not see the fruit of it, but our next generations. So we may not see the fruit of what we are doing now, but it is the reason that we should continue.
Indeed.
To let the next generations see.
Indeed.
I would like Dr. Nisreen, please add on.
Well, thank you so much, Professor NiNi. There is a beautiful say for Mahatma Gandhi. It says, there is enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. So if we live in the most forward, in an era where the most forward-thinking companies are taking our lives and selling it back to us, and we human beings are still quiet about it.
Yes.
Then what can we do? You know, we need to be heard. It's not to go into demonstrations, you know, or etc., but actually just to say that enough is enough, you know. Like, for example, I was listening to a speech or a presentation by a civil engineer, professor of civil engineering. And he was talking about those glass buildings that you see it everywhere, you know, and how much water it consumes, you know, and how much it reflects it causes heat as well, you know, and its impact on climate change. And then you hear about from him at the same time that now everyone, the definition of a freedom, because everyone is using free. I'm free to do, I'm free to speak, I'm free to this, everything is freedom. But what is the definition of freedom? It is like diplomacy. What is the definition of water diplomacy? You know, so actually there is here the I thinking, not the we. And I refer to the honorable guests in their speeches. If we stop thinking as the I, even that SDG 17, and it's like, which is about partnership, do they talk about the partnership? Or it is I? How many women organizations are existing? How many scientific organizations are existing? How many water organizations are existing? You know, they all speak the I, not the we. Everybody wants to do everything. Nothing is specialized. And the other thing is that we need to rethink how we bring the water story. For goodness sake, you know, like I had enough from hearing the stories about women carrying buckets on their head. You know, this is not, in some cultures, you know, women go to well to, you know, like to gossip, to nag about their husbands, or maybe to meet for the female youth to meet their beloved ones near the well, or to be seen, like something like this. So actually, we don't see the beauty, as Professor Moore said, that there is something beautiful inside every story, inside everything. We need to see that beauty. We need to look at the beauty. And this is when I said we need to value, to have our personal story with water. Once you have your personal story, then you can see these things through other people's eyes. Now, we are not talking philosophy here, but actually we need to change ourselves to work together. Like, for example, Eco-Civilization and the Royal Academy of Science International Trust, and Professor Eddie's Institute, and Madame Ursula Institute, etc. With all this, if we come and work together and not, and so we complement each other rather than we, copy paste our work, So this is how we need to move ahead. It is not difficult.
Exactly.
It is not difficult at all. When we started the February 11, the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, it was Razet and Malta. Then, if you come and see the 7th assembly, we have with Razet 14 member states co-organizers, 15 member states co-sponsors, and at the same time 7 UN agencies as co-sponsors. So imagine to this level how we move, because we think it is not Razet, it is everyone. This person can represent this, I compliment him with that. I am a geneticist, and my specialty is genetics and infertility. I cannot claim that I am a cardiologist, or I can be a nurse or a technician. We complement each other. Everyone, if we think then this is how we can solve the question. And you are so lucky to be in Slovenia.
So in this case, the conclusion is we need such a webinar, not every 3 months, maybe not every 3 days, as maybe every 3 days, And also the Q&A, let me read it. It also related to what we are talking now at this very second. Apana said, it is because we look at the Earth as blue planet, thus end up ignoring the case of water, thinking there is too much of it, even though clearly from the initial few slides by 2025, he referred to the chair's slide, a majority of us will facing acute water shortage. And the other question is water scarcity or water flood or excessive water are important? And how can we become more serious as individuals and communities towards the cause of water? So he means the cause, C-A-U-S-E, cause of water. And the second question he had is, even in coastal cities such as Mumbai and Chennai, there is an extreme water crisis. What steps can we take in terms of city planning to find sustainable solutions? Is it enough to simply mention the values we must imbibe to respect water in school and college textbooks? How should we make water a dinner table conversation? That's the best, saying. So please, panelists, I beg your response. And also our chair, please chip in.
Respectful moderator, we are running out of time, so I would respectfully ask if the moderators could reply to these questions directly to the Q&A section, because we really will have to wrap up really quickly. But I do want to give a chance to Natasha and to Rajni, who were waiting patiently for the last 20 minutes to raise their question. So let's give them a chance to ask. And moderators, I would really like to ask you to reply directly to Q&A. Thank you.
So can I join to the conversation? Hello, everybody from Novi Sad, Serbia. I think that it was great conversation today, and I would really like to subline the importance of communication of the scientists to the world. We were seeing in the pandemic, even if we are talking about the water today, that was the biggest failing of the communication. So it couldn't be allowed that the science, that the reach of the science was such neglecting in the population of the world. This is dramatically something what is not right. And I think that the institutes with all the knowledge they are having, they have to open to the world that this is not the closed circle just to do the job and that this is enough. This is not. We were facing this, so we can add to the all important things which are coming every day. We are living in very shaky period, and really this communication, the science, the simplest to say, the science should be the winner on this world. So that's my statement, and I would like to get some your answers on that, if it is possible. Thank you.
Who would like to answer that?
Maybe-
Yeah,
I,
yes,
I,
Eddie,
I,
please.
I can't give a real answer. The only thing I can say is that this is a quite big problem, and we've been facing this already in the climate science for a couple of decades. I think it started in Copenhagen, actually quite heavily. We had discussions about this. So how can you change that? It's quite difficult if somebody puts science in a difficult position to come out of that. The only way to do that in a good way is somebody else stands up and says, hey, you're wrong, and you should not do that. I do think that we have a big discussion about social media, not only about science. I think social media in general. I do hope that we will also make a step forward there, how we want to use that in a good way. One nice example I saw here, because you see the same thing happening in politics. You see discussions, people often look at their politicians as leaders, examples, and in a number of countries, and I've seen that also in the Netherlands, people don't behave as you would like them to behave. I saw a quite nice example there. We have very recently our Minister of Education is a professor of I think high standing in the Netherlands, and he was very clear. He said, I don't accept it if in an open debate in the cabinet people don't acknowledge the hard work that scientists and my administration is doing. So please, you can have a discussion, you can disagree, but you have to behave and have to speak and debate in a way that we can also give a reply and explain why we have another view on this. So I think it's a quite big society-related problem that we are having, but that we should face as well. But I think it starts by giving good examples. And I think that's maybe how we can best contribute to make a difference there. And speak up, dare to speak up. I think that's also important.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Actually, you see, I want to go on with this event until your tomorrow morning. but time is up and we are 5 minutes behind. So what I want to do now is I have a direct message to our chair and asking for permission to be late in total 15 minutes, okay? So in total 15 minutes, our chair will be giving the closing speech. And as a moderator, I will be giving the future steps, okay? But before everything else, I would very much like to thank our chair for her generous support and letting me use the eco-civilization platform to discuss about the life and death problem, which is water. And that is not only life and death problem, it is the existential problem, and it is the economic problem, and it is the political problem. So that is really very urgent. There is a famous saying that the tyranny of urgent ignore the importance, but water is not like that. It is urgent as well as important. So I am very, very grateful that my words not equal how grateful I am to be able to take part as eco-civilization and using the eco-civilization platform to tell the world that our problem is so. But then I am not talking, actually the panelists are talking. The top scientists, the top water education, the top water diplomacy, and the top global water partnership like community network practitioners, at the same time reaching the money pots like big banks. So you will see that the compilation of all these excellent panelists' input and presentation will be compiled. And then the Q&A. The Q&A session is like chocolate. You can't get enough of it, but that chocolate will be sold inside that, proceedings. Therefore, with that promise, which will be delivered as my trademark, now what is the next? So my chair told me, what is the next? You have 3 minutes. All right. The next is our discussion should not go down. Okay, our discussion should alive. And we get only 3 months per one webinar per 3 months, because as I explained in the beginning, we have 100 country chairs. Therefore, fighting for the space and fighting for the webinar is too tight, but we love each other. So of course we give way to each other, and everybody understands water is very important. Therefore, trust me, water get 3 times than the others. So that is already an honor. But how do we fill the gap? Between that 3-month period, I could imagine that we will make a lively forum like Facebook forum, and we keep on talking there with this group. So after today, after the closing speech, let us go to the Facebook platform and let us keep talking and the next webinar. And then between 2 webinars, let us keep talking. And then already IHE Rector is saying there are a lot of possibilities. The programmatic approach instead of project are short-lived. And then, some research, I don't name the organizations, okay? Some researcher already written that 50 to 60% of the projects by so-and-so big organizations fail. And then it was acknowledged by that so-and-so organizations. And the why is the question we ask the last 2 hours. So now I think that I would like to, also like Princess, I would like to quote and end my input that what will be the next. We will create the lively Facebook forum. We will be keeping ourselves reminded of this very issue until the next webinar. And meanwhile, if we are very fortunate, we will get a mechanism. So what is that is coming out of this code. We need to develop certain techniques that can help us to transform interfering forces into friends, harmful elements into spiritual teachers, and adverse circumstances into favorable ones. Do you know who said that? His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. With this, I would like to, actually end, although I don't want to, this Q&A session and give the floor respectfully back to our chair, H.E. Dr. Violeta Bulc. Violeta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my dear friend. Thank you very much, moderator, for this excellent work. And my heart is also hurts because we have to stop this conversation, but we know that we're going to be meeting at least twice more this year on this topic. And meanwhile, I think the capacity, we're building the capacity, right, Eddie? That's what you guys were inviting us into, all our excellent speakers. And I think we heard the voice. Let me just share a couple of powerful messages without trying to really dismiss all others, because every single speaker, the whole speech was really straight to the point and deep with the messaging. But right at the beginning, from our first speaker, we've heard this invitation: today a new journey of water begins. And I feel it as well. Under your leadership, dear friend NiNi, we will continue to engage and we will continue to deliver. And also, I've heard this very sincere call that it's time to use the conscious leadership in order to manage water better. And even though our dear friend Mansi is not with us today, but that's her topic, and maybe we can bring her into the circle, because this really conscious leadership and conscious organizations is something she's been promoting very strongly. At the same time, there were very clear messages about the risks, but also about the tools that are available. But I think one of the strongest calls was that to address the water issues and to engage in water diplomacy in a way, close partnerships are necessary. Close partnership within the holistic circles, within the holistic ecosystems. And through that, honoring not only the future, but also the past, honoring all these physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual levels of water, and understand that this is a subject that needs to be addressed through spirit and heart if we really want to make it sustainable. So what an incredible event. Thank you very much, really, again, to everyone for this insightful discussion about something that we take for granted so often, because it's part of our daily activities, daily lives. But at the same time, as I understood today, it does not have the needed attention at this point, and it does not have yet the needed level of respect and management in order to really stay as the real source of life for future generations. So I do have one plea, and maybe together we can start walking this path. I'd really like every citizen of this world to have a right for clean water. So if we can join forces, eco-civilization will do whatever we can to support this journey. You know, it's such an essential element, and I think every single person on this planet deserves it. Thank you.
I say yes, 100 times. Yes.